All right, here we go.
Okay, I can start. So the question I have is, in the daily practice, when is a good time to, or when would be beneficial to practice Brahma Vihara, loving kindness, etc., versus just being mindfulness of the full foundations?
Yeah. So when it comes to your meditation practice, you want to stay with the Brahma Viharas because within the meditation practice itself, you are establishing the four foundations of mindfulness. So the four foundations of mindfulness or right mindfulness leads into right collectedness. So it is part and parcel of that. So uh, you can decide what you feel or the mind feels like it needs for any given day when you start your practice. Maybe you want to start off with compassion, maybe you want to start off with equanimity. It really depends upon what the mind is telling you. So you want to start off with whatever Brahmavihara is uh, the mind inclined towards. And then in your daily living, you want to continue to establish the four foundations of mindfulness. There are some people who, for them, it is best suited that they continue to maintain awareness of the Brahma Viharas while whatever it is that they're doing. But at the very foundation of it, you want to be able to just be able to be in the present, where you're staying with your body, with the mind, with the sensations that are arising, the kind of feelings that are arising in the mind, and in the different mental objects. And for the purpose of the meditation, what I will always say is that the mindfulness should be established so that you can understand if there are any of the five hindrances present, namely craving or aversion in whatever it is that you're doing. So, this is the reason primarily why you are establishing mindfulness, so that you can notice it and you can let it go using the 6 hour process. So, in short, you want to maintain the Brahma Viharas for the meditation sitting, for the walking meditation, and in your day to day life, you can establish the four foundations of mindfulness. Um, and as an aside, you can also maintain awareness or start to work with the enlightenment factors. So if you feel like this is a day where the mind is feeling dull, bring in some investigations, bring in some energy and enthusiasm, bring in some joy. Or if you feel like the mind is too restless, like the mindset is restless, mindset being a collection of thoughts throughout the day or throughout an hour or whatever it might be, then you want to maybe pay attention more to tranquility and establish tranquility, or pay attention more to having a collected mind or having more equanimity.
Thank you.
Hi, Delson.
Well,
Um, I have a question regarding during the seating. How would we see the changing of our mind from a stage of uh, quite like from a stage of within the object of like the meditation, for example, is the radiation of the matter or the compassion, but all of like a sudden there is not all of a sudden there is the progress that when you see the mind is going to a more quiet state, like that flow of compassion and energy, is there any signals that we are going into a more quiet mind or a more collected mind, that we are turning the turning point? How do we identify that?
Yeah.
When is there a something that we can be more like clearly understanding when your mind is going to a deeper level of the stillness? Like, is that a naturally happening thing that you will be aware of?
Yeah. So when it comes to the quiet mind, it naturally arises after you go through the jhanas and through the ayatanas. The ayatanas being the understanding of compassion with infinite space, the understanding of joy or empathetic joy with infinite consciousness, and then the understanding of equanimity with nothingness. So when you are, for example, in infinite space and you have first the loving kindness that you are sending out, you're radiating, eventually that loving kindness becomes less personal. You don't really have any kind of inclination towards it to be able to send it out for one particular person or set of beings. It just is universal. And once that happens, you start to experience this spaciousness quite naturally. You don't need to push for it. Everything that arises quite naturally. The moment you start to control things, that's where the trouble is. That's where the suffering arises. Just allow things to arise as they will. And then when you experience the spaciousness, you're going to also experience the loving kindness start to dissipate. It might start to become softer in feeling. And that's really compassion. And you're more universally compassionate to all beings. And the difference between loving kindness and compassion is loving kindness has a certain energy to it. It has a certain vibrancy to it. Compassion is softer, more gentle, and it's all pervading. Eventually, as you're staying with this compassion, it will start to change to joy, and this joy is called empathetic joy. Some people call it just joy because really it is also part of the awakening factor of joy. But empathetic joy in general is about being able to celebrate in people's joys, in their successes. That's why it's considered to be an antidote for jealousy and envy and so on. And while you're doing this, certain things might happen with regards to the sensory consciousnesses, which is to say that you will start to experience something with the eyes, where you might start to see like a ring of light when you close your eyes, and then it might start to flicker, or you might see different kinds of images, like flickering white and black. In the ears, you might hear like a click or something like that. In the mind, you might feel some kind of electrical impulses, or you might start feeling something on your face. You might even have phantom smells. You might actually smell things that are not even possibly present, but it's just detecting things, or like electricity in the tongue. There are different kinds of ways these sensations arise. Now, the thing about these sensations is you notice these sensations and you realize that you didn't cause these sensations. They arose on their own, and they keep coming and going, keep coming and going. So this is the insight into impermanence and anatta, of seeing that it was not self-caused. It just arose because of a series of causes and conditions. Eventually, the mind gets bored of it, it becomes tiresome for it, and that's the suffering aspect of it, the dukkha aspect. So that naturally arises. You don't need to look for it. You just want to just pay attention to whatever Brahma Vihara naturally arises. So if you've been radiating metta, when it evolves naturally into compassion, you send that out. When it evolves naturally into joy, and that joy will feel a little more elevated, and it will just be very happy for the sake of being happy. It's not like you're necessarily wishing others happiness. You're just happy that others are happy. You're just celebrating in the world's happiness, in all beings' happiness. And then eventually, once you not notice this flickering or whatever it might arise in the way of consciousness, sensory consciousness, it starts to slow down, and there is a space between a flicker. And that space you start to pay attention more towards. And the joy will start to then dissipate. It will start to plateau, and you're going to notice what is known as equanimity. Equanimity is really a deepening of the rest of the Brahma Viharas. You could say it's like a nest where within that nest are the other three Brahma Viharas. Equanimity is really not being involved in another person's pain, but understanding it, being there for them, and not being disturbed by it. That is really equanimity, being unruffled by good or bad. It's not moving here or there. It's just paying very close attention, not focused. It has very open awareness towards that nothingness, that space between the flickers. When you start noticing that, then the flickers just disappear. Whatever sensory consciousness is there, it just disappears because of lack of attention. Whatever you pay attention to, that starts to grow. So here, that equanimity deepens. It deepens where we are continuing to radiate, and the mind is no longer attentive towards any sensations, inner or outer. And when I say outer, related to the world outside, when I say inner, I'm talking about internal contact that happens within the mind. So the flicker that you hear is an internal sense contact, which is happening at the level of mind. It's a mental, uh, it's a mental contact with the ear faculty, or with the nose faculty, or with the eye faculty, and so on. So once you start to have this equanimity that deepens, you start to lose your attention on that sensory consciousness. It just naturally goes away. And now you're with this deep sort of nothingness space. And you're just here, and you're continuing to radiate the equanimity. As you're radiating the equanimity, at a certain point, it feels like the mind doesn't want to radiate anymore. So the radiating of the equanimity starts to dissipate. At that point, mind is very quiet and clear. What you do is you try to intend the equanimity again. You try to intend radiating the equanimity again. At a certain point, it will feel tense for the mind to try to radiate the equanimity. That's where you know, okay, mind is now utterly content. It is satisfied with just resting in the awareness of itself, and that is that quiet, tranquil, bright, radiant, clear mind. That mind will naturally arise after you go through this process. It's using that simile of the gold ore. By the process of jhana and by the process of using the Brahma Viharas, you are further and further purifying the mind. And in the same way, as you burn up the impurities of the gold ore, there is just this pure gold. And that pure gold is that clear mind, which is malleable, which can be used in order to see the insights, start to see closer at the formations that are arising. So it's a natural progression. You don't need to look for it. But when you recognize it, you'll recognize it by understanding that the mind is completely content. It doesn't want to radiate anymore, and it's completely content with just staying in that quietude.
I want to know if that. I want to know one more thing, is that at what stage will the sensory, like conscious perception will disappear? Like, are we still able to notice the environment, although that you're in a deeper state behind of like what is externally we are experiencing? We can we still hear sounds, outer sounds? And or at what stage that part will be not happening? We might not be noticing our forms, right? I understand there is certain times that we lost the sense of the form, part of the form of the body, but to what stage are the the sensory of like noise or sound, not noise, I mean sounds or fragrance, or like, is there a line where we would notice there? Because, yeah.
Yeah, usually at the level of nothingness, you start to not notice the sounds anymore, because you will start to notice them. You will still notice them in the fourth jhana. They'll be very distant. They won't disturb you because there's deep equanimity there. In the fourth jhana onwards, you start to lose awareness of the body. That's why then it's called the formless jhanas, the arupa jhanas, because you're no longer being able to connect with the body. The body is there, but there's no sense impact. There's no contact with the body that is being felt. There's no experience there happening. Having said that, if a mosquito lands on you or a fly lands on your skin, you might notice it or you might not notice it. Or if you notice it, it's not as stark or as profound as when you are just in ordinary, day-to-day consciousness. From the fifth, sixth, and seventh jhanas, this starts to become even further refined. And by the time you're in the seventh jhana, you notice very barely any sounds, if at all. And it's really at the eighth jhana that no sounds actually start to penetrate the mind. Having said that, you are in the eighth jhana when you are in this state where there is this sort of dreamlike scenario where you start to see images, you start to see things that are disconnected, and you're starting to look at the formations. Because the mind is so pure, the mind is so quiet, it doesn't get out of that state so easily, but it can when you start to perceive things. And perceiving or perception is that part of the mind which starts to name what is arising. So this neither perception or non-perception is where there is this disconnected imagery happening in the mind, but you're not really able to pinpoint what it is. In this state, there will be very little registration of the outside world, if at all. And if it does arise, for example, there might be a sound that might arise. There will be contact with the ear and that sound, but how it is registered is totally different in neither perception or non-perception. It might just be so distant that you don't even consciously uh, register it. You don't consciously become aware or attentive towards it. And of course, it is that sensation of perception and feeling where nothing penetrates the mind from the outside. So there is no contact arising with the mind that is completely registered. It's not registered at all, which is to say that even if you were to snap a finger at the ear of somebody who's in cessation or start to, bang a pot and pan, they're not going to be able to hear it. If you touch them, they're not going to be able to feel it. That is where all feeling is not felt, meaning it is the total cessation of feeling and perception.
Hi, Delson. If I could ask a question on what you said. You mentioned earlier on in the jhana, you might feel sensations like a flickering in, the eyes and the ears. When that happens, is one meant to actively 6R the awareness of these sensations? Or is it just if the mind doesn't necessarily get absorbed in it, it is just letting that happen? So the question is, are we meant to be 6Ring or just it is just what it is during the meditation?
So when you start to notice these flickers in the eyes and whatever it might be, when you're experiencing infinite consciousness, while you're seeing this, you're still radiating compassion, which means your awareness is open enough to be able to notice this arising and passing away of consciousness, but your attention is unified around the compassion or the loving kindness, whatever the Brahma Vihara is. But in this case, the compassion. It's in the same way like when you were in the lower jhanas where you were starting to radiate, where you were starting to feel metta for yourself and sending it out to a spiritual friend. There might be certain thoughts in the background, but you're aware of those thoughts in the background, but those thoughts are not pulling your attention away. When they start to pull your attention away, that's when you start to 6R and then come back. In the same way, when you're noticing this flickering of consciousness, this arising and passing away of consciousness, it's there in your awareness, but you're still radiating compassion. It's only when you stop radiating compassion and the attention is now just on the flickering that you 6R it and then come back to the compassion. You see, the Brahma Viharas are your object, your vehicle for meditation, because they are what anchor you to reality as it is. They help you to be rooted in the present as it is arising. Whereas if you get sidetracked and you start to notice the flickering or whatever it might be, you might start to go into that and it might cause you to create proliferation in the mind. So this is why you want to stay attentive to the compassion. You continue to radiate it, be aware that this is arising. And then in that awareness, you also notice how it changes, how it slows down, and then it just turns into nothingness where the space between each flicker widens as you become more aware of it. And then that then becomes the next stage of nothingness. But while that happens, what you're more profoundly noticing is how the compassion changes to, or rather how the joy changes to equanimity. So really joy is the prominent Brahmavihara that one is experiencing during infinite consciousness, not compassion, that would be infinite space. But whatever it might be, the main thing to understand here is there's just the open awareness of whatever is happening while you're keeping your attention on the Brahma Vihara. And then when it disturbs you, you 6R.
Teacher Delson, is it me? For the feeling of compassion, when I radiate it, like as what you told me to do, then it's giving slowly. You told me to notice the changes. I can feel that it is, you know, giving a different feeling, like rising joy, and that is becoming more dominant when you compare to the peaceful feeling of compassion.
Yeah.
And when that happens, the consciousness become more and more. So which one should I choose? Because some of it is because fast, some of it is low. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wherever the mind directs you towards. So whenever I talk about sensory consciousness, it arises dependent upon what is most dominant in the way of your formations. So if such a person were, let's say, a musician, they're always using their ears primarily to listen. And so more often than not, they will start to hear flickering in the ears. If somebody's more visually oriented, if they're a painter or they always need to use their eyes in whatever that they're doing, they will start to notice the light. They will start to notice the flickering of the light or whatever it might be. Whatever is arising in your case, just allow it to arise and just have the awareness of it. And notice how, as you just mentioned, the compassion is changing. It's becoming more into joy. So In the noticing of the arising and passing away of consciousness, what you want to see is how the mind perceives it in the way of the three characteristics of reality. How in this arising and passing away, there is this impermanence. How in this arising and passing away, there is no controller here. There's nobody here actually causing them. When you see how this arose, you didn't actually cause it, it just arose because of a series of causes and conditions. And eventually, mind actually tires of having this awareness of the sensory consciousness arising and passing away. And that tiredness is the suffering, is the dukkha. On a larger scale, what that translates to is the tiredness of samsara. I mean, you have been, not you, but the formations have been activating consciousness for so many times throughout eons that eventually the mind becomes tired of having seen it on this micro level where this consciousness is arising and passing away. And that is the dukkha that is inherent in samsara. So for your case, what you want to do is just allow your mind to start to notice what it is looking at, whether it's the eyes or the ears or whatever it might be. It might be slow, it might be fast, doesn't matter. Eventually, whatever it might be will start to fade away into where it becomes less and less frequent, and eventually it will stop, and then there will be this nothingness.
Thank you. And is it common that if after doing this part of the meditation, coming out from it, you will feel joyful when you compare it to doing compassion and metta? Because we, that's the feeling when I do it compared to the other one.
You're talking about when you
Joy.
come out of the experience of the consciousness, infinite consciousness, or you're saying coming out of the meditation?
Yeah.
Which one are you?
Coming out from the meditation.
Okay. So when you come out of the meditation, you want to try to still maintain the awareness of whatever it is that arose. So if it was still compassion, just continue with your awareness of the compassion. If it is joy, just continue with your awareness of the joy.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Delson.
Hello.
I have a question regarding the bodily formation in the Aruba jhana. So I just wonder, in the Aruba jhana, like you mentioned that usually we don't feel anything from the neck down. But sometimes I notice that there's air coming in and out of the nose. And is that getting subtler as once move up to the jhana, and eventually we don't notice that at all? Or if we start to notice this, we will recognize it.
Yeah, you would recognize it if you pay attention to it. You see, attention is like a gate. It's like a conscious gate. So like, as soon as you put your attention on it, it puts a spotlight on it. It opens the gate so that you're more aware of whatever it is arising. In the case of noticing whether your breathing is slowed down. When you get towards the fourth jhana, what is happening is the mind and the body have become so calm and so collected that the requirement for oxygenation, the requirement for the airflow has diminished. It's not that it completely stops, but it has profoundly diminished to a point where you might notice that the breathing is very, very subtle, very, very subtle. And because of that, the need for you to have more air is less. The requirement for you to breathe in deeper is less. And eventually, and this arises quite naturally. It happens because as your mind becomes collected around your object, and as you experience the joy in the first and second jhana, as you experience the ease in the second and third jhana, as you experience the sharp mindfulness and equanimity in the fourth jhana, all of these different feelings and experiences, which are the different factors of the jhanas, are creating certain neurotransmitters in the mind. Which is to say, you have an elevation of dopamine, you have an elevation of serotonin. Eventually, that becomes saturated, and then you have what are known as endorphins that arise. And this is related to a mind and body that is quite at ease and very relaxed. Eventually, all of that goes away, and the mind is so naturally purified in the fourth jhana that it's not looking for anything, including the need for food, the need for water, or the need for air. Having said that, it doesn't mean that if you're in the fourth jhana, you won't be hungry, or that hunger won't biologically arise, or thirst won't biologically arise. You may notice it, but you won't be bothered by it because of the deep equanimity. In the same way, the air that you breathe, or the breathing pattern, becomes slower and slower and slower. And you might notice this, as I said, when you pay attention to it, but you're not required to pay attention to it. What you're required to do is pay attention to the object. But if you notice it, it's just there. It's just part of the fourth jhana.
Thank you.
Hello, Delson.
Hello.
Everybody. I have a question about the three taints.
Yes.
The taint of sensual desire, the taint of being, and the taint of ignorance. My understanding is ignorance is not knowing the Four Noble Truths and the virtues, and the taint of sensual desire is the craving. But what is the taint of being?
Yeah.
And what is it?
So the taint of bhava, being, or the taint for existence, a craving for existence is another way to understand it. It's essentially seeing that the mind is still identifying with what is arising. When I look at the taint of, for example, sensual craving or sensory craving, it's related to being identified with the senses. And that's deeply rooted in also the taint of bhava, the taint of being. The taint of being is related to this idea that there's this identification with the five aggregates, there's identification with the mind and body, there is the identification with whatever is arising. And because of that, there's no ability to see reality as it is, because it is always being projected onto or projected by your associations, by your past memories, by personalizing things. So the taint of being is what starts to project outward the personalizing of this. Maybe you might see a tree out there and then recognize that tree being a certain type of tree, and then it triggers a memory, and you go into this whole thing of identifying with that tree because you start triggering all of these memories. So that taint, that asava, that projection of being is very much that, is identifying with existence and seeing a sense of self in existence, or that existence affects a sense of self.
It sounds like you're almost describing it like there's perception already. Whereas my understanding is the taints are even before ignorance.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the taints or the asavas are like the seeds for that projection to arise. In other words, the bhava, in the link of bhava, the link of being, which is right after clinging, is where the accumulation of tendencies are. And there are these underlying tendencies that cause one to crave, that cause one to cling, and cause one to identify, and so on and so forth. So there are these 7 underlying tendencies. There's the tendency towards craving, towards aversion, towards views, towards doubt, towards being, towards conceit, and towards ignorance. And these underlying tendencies arise based on how one clings and how strongly one clings to, whether it's views, to self-view, towards rites and rituals, or to sensory experiences. This is all arising because of the asavas. So the asavas are what turn the wheel of samsara, that turn the wheel of the parent origination. So for one who is yet to become an arahat, there will still be, depending upon where they are, in whatever stage they are at, there will still be present the taint of being, because they're still identifying with it. It means that there's a seed, there's a potential for it to arise. So what I was talking about is the effect of that, meaning it's the active sense of that word. But the taint itself, the asava itself, is the seed. It's the causal root from which that possibility of identifying can arise.
Okay. You just mentioned another question I have, but anyway, I'll get to it after.
Do you remember the question?
I do, but I can't remember which one it is.
Okay.
I'll get to it after. Okay. So you just mentioned the 4 kinds of clinging, and one of them is clinging to rules and observances. Can you give examples of that, please?
Yeah. So the way I understand clinging to rites and rituals or rules and observances is where the rules dominate the mind. So we understand, for example, that there are certain rules and guidelines, for example, following the precepts and so on and so forth. That's non-negotiable. You want to be able to follow the precepts as best as you can, always. But the rites and rituals in this case are related to rites and rituals and the belief that rites and rituals can lead to nibbana, can lead to salvation, or however you want to see it. So, you know, historically, during the Buddha's time, for example, the predominant culture or the predominant spirituality at that time in India was Vedic Hinduism. I wouldn't say it was Hinduism, but it was Brahmanism. It was the understanding that sacrifices and certain rites and rituals could cleanse one's karma. Certain rites and rituals could lead one to moksha. Moksha being the freedom from the wheel of samsara, according to their beliefs. Also known as mukti, also known as vimukti, which is in the Pali. So this idea that one depends upon and clings to certain rites and rituals as a way of cleansing karma, as a way of leading to nibbana, is what needs to be seen and let go of.
Thank you. Delson, I'll ask another question if I could.
Go ahead.
With the Four Noble Truths, I find it difficult to see the origin. So the second one, to see where something begins. And often I don't really want to. I mean, study it, analyze it to that degree. Can you just speak to that?
Yeah. So the first noble truth we understand is to be suffering. And then the second noble truth we understand is to be the cause of suffering. Now, in the very compact version, we're talking about craving or tanha. That's that link of tanha, which is the cause of suffering. But if you were to elaborate that and understand it on a deeper level, it's talking about dependent origination and how suffering arises and how the factors create this idea of a sense of self. If you look at the first noble truth, it talks about the aggregates and the aggregates that are affected by clinging. It is through the five aggregates, which is the body, the form, and the senses, which are made up of that form, the feeling that arises from the sensory experiences, the perception, which is the recognition of what that is, the formations, which are the deeper rooted habitual tendencies, things related to how we breathe, how we move, things related to how we think, how we speak, things related to how we experience reality. And then cognition, which is the attention towards whatever it is that is arising, or consciousness is another way of explaining it. These five aggregates themselves are through which the craving can arise, through which identification can arise, through which aversion can arise. So at the link of feeling, when you look at it from the idea of dependent origination, when there's a sensory experience or there's a thought that arises, the taking of that experience or the taking of that thought as mine, as me, as I, is what is the craving. Because from there then arises that idea of, oh, I want that. I resonate with that. So I want more of that. Or I don't like this, this disturbs me, or that sense of me, and I am going to, push it away. Or just the neutral feeling where you just have this idea that I am experiencing it. This is craving, really. So in order to recognize it, how you recognize it is paying attention to the sensations that are arising. That's why the four foundations of mindfulness are very important here, because then that's where you start to notice and recognize, is the mind starting to identify with what is happening and therefore craving the experience or having aversion towards it. When you notice that, then that's when you can let it go. You can release your awareness from that and then let that go. This is how it would be very simple for one just living in their daily process of life to notice, is there tension in the mind? Is there tension in the body? And how is this tension arising? Is it because I'm identifying with something too closely or too tightly? Am I seeking something, or am I trying to push something away? So these kind of questions, if you ask, this is really that yoniso manasikara, the attention rooted in reality. What is the reality of the situation? In recognizing and using that attention to see if that tightness and tension is present. When you notice it and let it go, then you experience that relief, which is that mundane nibbana. In that clarity of mind, you experience that mundane nibbana. And that is the third noble truth. And the process of using these different tools is what encompasses the fourth noble truth, which is elaborated through the Eightfold Path.
I guess I thought the first one was recognizing and being aware of it. And then the third one being the release. So I just have a hard time with the second one because it seems too analytical.
Yeah, you don't need to analyze it. That's what I'm saying. So for example, you say the first one is recognizing it. Yes. The first noble truth is knowing that there is a potential for suffering to arise anytime you experience something through the five aggregates or through the mind and body. Whatever experience arises, there's a potential to identify with it. The recognition really happens, or the letting go of it actually. When you go back to the Four Noble Truths, what is it that you're actually doing? You're understanding that there is suffering present. So that is definitely recognizing. You're abandoning craving. So in the abandoning of craving, you recognize where that craving arose from. So it's as simple as seeing that, oh, it was because of this disturbing sound that the mind got agitated and then started identifying with it. So I'm going to let go, or the mind there's a process of letting go of identifying with that sound and just seeing that sound as impersonal. You don't need to analyze it any further than that, but just seeing that there was a personalizing link between the sound and the ear and the mind. So that's, and then letting it go, abandoning the cause of the suffering. The third noble truth is actually just feeling that experience of relief, the nirodha, which happens in the process of the 6 R's at the relaxed step, having relaxed and let go of the tension that arises. And of course, the fourth noble truth is just the utilization of these to get to the third noble truth.
Thank you.
Delson, if no more other questions, I would like to ask more on these 5 aggregates that you were just mentioned, and on today's talk that you have explained it as the as intertwined with the formation to the process of how it gets into the materiality mentality, and it all like goes back to the 5 aggregates. But you have mentioned about the process of like the feeling, perception, contact, and intention and attention. That the intention and attention part, can you elaborate a bit more on that? Is that what we are starting to attach, starting to identify, or you mean that that is part of the, can you explain a little bit better for me, please? Yeah.
So this is the way to understand it. So if you look at it from the process of dependent origination, you have the formations, which are related to the deep-rooted processes related to breathing and mechanical aspects of the body, related to feeling and perception, which are the potentials for how one will perceive or feel something, related to the, again, the other thing is they're carriers of karma. So any contact that arises will activate a set of formations, which will then activate a certain series of consciousnesses related to that experience. That is rooted in the mind and in the body. The mind has faculties, these 5 faculties that you just mentioned: contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. Then there is within the mind and body the 6 sense bases: the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the skin or the body, and the mind itself, the faculties or the senses, the 6 sense bases. When there is stimulation of any of these 6 sense bases, that is contact. That is to say that the photons, the light energy, hits the retina and the photoreceptors in the eye, and that impact with the photoreceptors is contact. The feeling is the sensation of having seen that light, seeing, for example, a tree, seeing that bird, whatever it might be. Perception is recognizing that that is a tree. It's what you were told or what you understood or what you learned, which was then put into your memory bank as a way of recognizing, okay, that is green. Okay, this is the taste sour. Okay, that is the sound of a violin, or whatever it might be. That's perception. So that is the process of perception. This is where you need to understand processes and faculties. Faculties are essentially, you could say, the receptors, the ways in which contact, feeling, and perception arise. So you have, for example, the faculty of contact, the organ, so to speak, the way, that part of the brain, part of the mind, in which one can experience the process of contact, which is the stimulation of the six sense bases. Then you have the faculty for feeling, which is that part of the mind where you can experience how feeling arises. Then you have that part of the mind, which is perception, which then experiences the recognition of that color, the recognition of that sound, or recognizing that this feeling is pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant or painful. And then you have intention and attention. Intention is where karma is then, you could say, activated. So you have the carrier of karma, which is formations, which arises because of contact with the outside world. So let's say you see something, and whatever it is you're seeing activates a certain type of formation or a series of formations that activate the visual consciousness, the visual cognition of that. Paying attention to that is then directing that awareness. The attention is rooted with consciousness. Paying attention to that is directing that consciousness and perceiving that consciousness, knowing that consciousness is there. Intention is how you react to what it is that you have seen. So if you have seen something that is unpleasant, for example, your reaction to that then causes your intention to either make a choice, either through your process of speech or action or even thinking, that this is unpleasant, and then reacting in that way. On the flip side of that, if you see something or you smell something that is fragrant and very beautiful and very nice and pleasant, it will activate certain type of formations that will activate the sensory cognition. The attention to that is then placing that consciousness or paying attention to that consciousness of that fragrance, of that smell. It's the nose consciousness and the consciousness or awareness of that smell. That's the faculty of attention through which this consciousness moves. So the attention is both a process of directing one's awareness towards that experience. That's attention. Intention is where once you smell that fragrant, whatever it be, you then have the intention of, let's say, picking up the flower, if it's a flower, or putting your nose closer towards that flower to take in more of that scent or whatever it might be. That intention is then what causes you to choose to identify and say, I really like this, and then crave more for it. So formations flow through the faculty of intention, and consciousness as a process flows through the faculty of attention.
Okay. The intention, the faculty of intention is karma related. Can we say that? Like, because why that has to happen? Like, we have that faculty, but that intention is there, is, as what you have just mentioned, is more karma related, but the attention was following that intentions to create that is the process of the consciousness of that things that you put an attention into. So this is also like the whole formation and the intertwine with the 5 aggregates of all is
Yeah, so the 5 aggregates are,
It's yeah, it's an apparatus, but it gave the the faculties, the functioning of the 5 things that you just mentioned. But the intention and attention, I wasn't very clear, but now it's a little bit better. I think, yeah, I can continue to chew on it. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Delson.
Hi, Delson. Yeah, speaking of intentions, as you explained, I also from the materials, if I understand it correctly, the past karmas coming in as formation, consciousness, and other things coming in, but from the past. But and even though we don't have any control in terms of this whole impersonal process, but the intention at the present moment somewhat give us the freedom of choice, or
yes,
I would say free will to whether or not to choose to react or choose to respond, and that is take us to the wholesomeness or unwholesomeness.
that's right. So intention happens at the level of feeling. You see, everything from the process of, in the links of dependent origination, from formations all the way up to feeling and perception, is the old karma, as you just mentioned. It's the old effects, it's the effects of the old karma. Intention is how you respond or how you react to that karma. So if you crave, if you identify with that sensory experience and then crave for it or have aversion towards it, then you are causing new karma to arise. So your choice of identifying with it will cause new karma to arise, the effects of which you will experience at another link of feeling in the future. Then at that choice, then you still have the intention of saying, I choose not to identify with this, or I understand that this is impersonal. I understand that this is, I have the mindfulness and awareness that this is impersonal and all the other aspects of wisdom, and letting that go. And in that letting go process, you're letting go of that karma instead of reacting to it, which will then cause another series of chain of karma and so on.
Thank you.
Delson, I have a question that follows Helen's first question about joy. And in the Brahma Viharas, joy taps out at the realm of infinite consciousness. But it's also one of the 7 factors. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering how that is different than that joy that no longer continues, and this 7 factors joy that obviously does.
Yeah. So the way I understand the awakening factor of joy is that within this, you have the experience of the piti, the joy that you experience in the first and second jhana. The joy then arises in the form of empathetic joy in the sixth stage. So here, this still is activating that awakening factor of joy, although on a more refined level. The awakening factor of joy, as translated from the Pali, is still piti. It's that energetic joy that arises. But within that is inclusive of the joy that is experienced in the first, second, and in the sixth stage. But as you get deeper into the 8th jhana, then you're actually starting to play around with the different enlightenment factors. Because when you're in the 8th jhana, the mind has become so pure, has become so quiet, that because of a lack of stimulation, because of a lack of activities that are arising or not arising, the mind starts to get bored. I mean, that's the way it's translated. People get bored, they say. And that boredom can translate into restlessness or sloth and torpor, mental lethargy. This mental lethargy or lethargy is basically where the joy needs to be activated again, but it's just the intention of having that joy to then deflect and replace that sloth and torpor with a more balanced mind. So whenever you are in any kind of jhana, there is present one or more of the enlightenment factors, one or more of the awakening factors. Equanimity, for example, is present in the 4th jhana. It's also present in the 7th jhana. And the equanimity is then starting to activate whenever restlessness arises in the 8th jhana. When you start to go into seeing that the quiet mind becomes restless, then you just add the intention of equanimity. And in the process of utilizing the process of relaxing and letting go, you are utilizing tranquility. You are actively utilizing tranquility as a way to let go. When you experience the smile, that's another way to activate joy. So all of these different enlightenment factors come into play dependent upon the different factors of the jhana. They will still be present to certain degrees in each of the jhanas. And then when they all come into balance, you have the right, let's say, combination of the jhana, of the awakening factors. That's where then awakening arises, which is to say you have the experience of wisdom and understand how this whole process works. So I will take one more question. If anybody has a question, I'll wait for 10, 20 seconds more. And then after that, we can share something. Okay. Let's share some merit.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.